Welcome to Plug and Pay, a talk show where we invite interesting payroll professionals from all around the world to talk about thought-provoking, inspiring topics that are shaping the global payroll space. Every 2 weeks, we release a new episode, which you can find on YouTube, on our LinkedIn channel, as well as the most common podcast channels. Today, I'm very excited to welcome to our episode Thomas Emmrich, a German compatriot of mine, as well as a payroll professional with 10 years of experience in the global payroll space. Thomas is currently International Payroll Manager at Parexel. Thomas, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe we start off by having you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background.
Hi, I'm Thomas Emmrich. I am actually an industry engineer. I have a major in controlling and quality management. I started in bookkeeping at Parexel as a student, worked there for a year, moved abroad, lived in the Philippines for a year, came back, needed a job. HR welcomed me as a student back, and then after some time while I was still studying, I was offered a position as a payroll analyst at Parexel. And then in the end, now I'm leading EMEA payroll operations. It just happened.
Yeah, as it happens so often, right? People end up in a payroll position just by kind of going down different paths. And I like actually, in terms of your background, you have seen both sides, the kind of HR side and the finance side. And I suppose payroll sort of meets somewhere in the middle between those two. So I think that's a very interesting combination of experiences that you bring together. So in today's session, Thomas, we're going to talk a bit about, I guess, the world of payroll data and payroll reporting and analytics. And to start us off on that topic, I'm curious in terms of your thoughts. Do most companies, do you think most companies are aware of the potential that payroll data actually holds for them?
It depends on the point in time when you would have asked me. Right now, I would say yes, we are trending there. Not maybe everyone is making use of it. I don't have empiric data to prove it, but my impression, like what I see in the payroll environment, is this is the trend where we are going. Like vendors, they don't offer not only payroll processing, but also payroll analytics. And companies, also depending on what the company does, values payroll more or less, or needs to look into payroll details more or less. Like a blue-collared worker producing company maybe does not have as much payroll cost as a labor-intensive company like ours, or a consulting company like, which is human capital is the capital. So it really depends on the company, on the size, and maybe also the geographic footprint. But I would say yes, more and more.
So it's evolved from kind of not being so much of a focus to these days becoming more and more of a thing that companies actually focus on. As you mentioned, it depends a bit on the industry, how important that information is. Do you think, so even those companies that are using payroll data, that are getting those reports, do you think they are making really good use of that data, or are there things that companies are not quite getting out of the payroll data yet that maybe they could be or should be looking at?
Yes, and you hear me saying that maybe more often, and that's a running gag in our company. It depends. It really depends. So if a company has the bandwidth and the capacity and the technology and the resources maybe to aggregate payroll data, to make it comparable, to analyze it this way, have also the time to understand it, then maybe, yes, it drives decision making. But if it's really fragmented, localized, local language, lots of data, then it's hard to aggregate it, and then you always have to react more. It really depends. So whatever tools the company has available, maybe they make use of it, or to a certain extent or not. And I have peers which I talk to, and yeah, everyone has sometimes more or less a challenge there, or it depends also on the question. What are we trying to solve for? What are we trying to answer the question? And or you don't have even the right question in the first place. But that's
Yeah.
what I can see.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I think that kind of leads into a question that I also have around making use of the data. Obviously, as you already mentioned, there's lots of data that you collect in a payroll environment, and the first people that use the data or have their hands on the data are obviously the payroll professionals themselves. But the payroll data, of course, is not just about the payroll, right? There's HR, there's finance, there's other functions in the organization that could or maybe should benefit from that data. And I'm curious, in your experience, I know you've obviously done a lot within your current role over the years, advancing the payroll function in terms of the use of data. In exposing that to other roles, other functions outside of payroll, what has been your experience? Where is it most useful? Who's using it? For what kind of purposes are people outside of payroll using that kind of data?
First of all, it's the baseline for audits. That's really the bread and butter of what payroll data is used for. In-depth analytics for statutory audits or internal audits, that really the payroll data is scrutinized to even employee level. This is really what payroll data is most commonly used for. This is just literally basic reporting.
Basic reporting around, did we get actually all the payroll processing correctly done, right? Was
Yes.
everyone paid in a correct and compliant manner? Yeah.
Yes, and accounted for properly. And we live, for example, in a very controlled environment. Our company is following the US GAAP accounting principles. So that puts an extra layer on it, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, whatsoever. And in addition, what it is used for, we accrue a lot of bonus programs, and then payroll reporting is used against accruals, be it a restructuring, whatsoever, where you have to really prove the numbers. For business units which make use out of our data, that's not as much yet evolved. Like, we are working right now with one of our SBUs, it's early phase, which has a different kind of work model. Not a work model, they have a different line of product than other departments. We have a clinical research unit. So they have volatile hours, they have shifts and whatsoever. So their payroll fluctuates a lot on the variable items. And right now we develop like reporting to them so that they can analyze where their cost drivers are coming from. Another aspect is we need to reclass cost often for, let's say, to clients if we want to re-invoice, and fringe cost, for example. For fringe cost allocation, we use payroll data. We try to
What would that be? You said fringe cost?
yes,
Fringe cost, French or French?
fringe, not French.
Fringe, not the French. Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard
Cost
it correctly.
also exists in French payroll.
Exactly, yeah. There's the French cost for the French payroll. I like how two Germans are talking about this in English. So what would be examples of fringe costs? Just
A fringe is just a conglomeration of all employer costs. It's the
Okay.
overhead. And it's very different depending on the country, depending on the industry, depending on the payroll month, and what else is considered, like thresholds, social security limits, income tax limits, whatever.
Right. So these would be employer contributions to, let's say, unemployment, other social security insurances, taxes that the employer pays. Got it. Okay.
And if it's defined, for example, including benefits or accrued vacation, so the fringe definition needs to be exact, and everyone needs to understand the same under it.
Right, right.
That's what we use it mainly for.
Okay. So it sounds like it's kind of a mix between, initially, from an audit perspective, there's obviously importance for the payroll department, for the payroll function, But then some of the other examples you've given with the bonus accruals and those kind of things are more related than to finance, if I understand correctly, because that would obviously be an important financial accounting aspect for them to have visibility into, but also HR. How would HR make use, or in your experience within Parexel, do you see specific data requirements that HR is bringing to you where they're saying, hey, we'd like to be able to analyze the following types of information? How can you help?
Mostly about the variable items, like if we would do this, how much would it cost us? I don't know, let's say we want to roll out a benefit program, how much will that in the end cost, including the employer cost, because just giving a gross amount is not maybe the full scale of what the total employer cost is. And or if we roll out this benefit and does it have a tax saving for the employee, the employer, both? Or in the end, really just report how much we paid for a restructuring and prove it with the pay slips. But usually it's more data is coming from HR to us than backwards.
Yeah. Well, obviously, yeah, you need a lot of inputs into the payroll process from HR in order to run your payroll properly. But it's interesting. It sounds like from an HR perspective, the use for data is the examples you've given just now related to kind of what if type of scenarios, more forward looking than maybe necessarily backward looking. Even though, of course, in order to do some what if analysis, you first need to establish what's the current situation, what's the current baseline, right?
Yeah, and it's also due to the fact that we have a good HR system, or we have an HR system, like a worldwide HR database, which has contracted salary in it. So HR looks from it from a different point of view. So it's not like there is no database there. If our company wouldn't have that, payroll would be the only source maybe, but there is other data, and it's also available in our base currency in US dollar.
Yeah.
So analytics can also be run out of the HR system.
Got it. Now, when we talk about payroll data, one of the things that people, especially people that maybe are not working in payroll directly, think about when they hear payroll is this is kind of a reactive type of function. It's a back office, very transactional, and certainly there's, I think, some truth to that. But in my mind, payroll has the opportunity, or should be more proactive, more sort of strategically oriented. And I wonder, from your perspective, having worked in this role for more than 10 years now, and having seen sort of a progression, evolution, do you think payroll can become that more proactive strategic partner in the organization? And if so, related to our topic of data, what role do you think data and analytics and reporting can or should play in evolving the role of payroll from being viewed as reactive to be more proactive strategic partner to the business?
Yeah, so regarding payroll in itself, payroll is in itself a result-driven process. Everything comes to payroll and is processed. It's a transformative process, right? So I don't think it can be 100% only proactive. We will always be a little bit reactive because we get input. But what we at least try, our payroll organization, is trying to be involved when decisions are made, how they impact the outcome. Like, is it feasible? Is it possible? Is it worth doing? Is it compliant? Is it maybe the company has a good idea to put a program in, but it's maybe administratively, at least for a specific company, it doesn't need to be for every company a complication, but maybe it's just for this company a problem to implement it, and maybe cost benefit ratio is not worth it. So payroll should be involved, in my opinion, from the start, be it just in regards of actually doing it, and then how does it affect the books? How does it get in there? How is it understood? How is it later reviewed? So this is how I see payroll evolving.
Yeah. Okay. So data plays a role in that, right? To help understand what will be the impact. Because if you don't have all your data sort of consistently organized, I would imagine finding answers to those questions would be very, very tricky, right?
Yeah, I have seen actions and decisions being made under an assumption which leads to an expected result, but the expected result didn't occur. And then when looking back, it was clear, like if you would have decided, if that would have been reviewed with actual payroll data and simulated, but simulations are difficult, but if it would have been simulated, the outcome would have been reviewed completely different. So without going into detail, at one point there was an initiative to save cost, and the actions taken increased cost actually. It just happened, but it's because payroll has so many factors, so many variable inputs, you sometimes don't know how they change until you actually do it or simulate it.
Right. I suppose even with the best sort of data foundation, there could be sort of variables that are hard to assess ahead of time. But if you have at least all your data properly organized and pulled together, you start off with a better, with a better sense of what maybe could happen, right?
Yeah, simple example. If you ask me, Thomas, what's the fringe rate for this particular country or to accrue that bonus? It depends. Like, is it a high earner? Is it a low earner? Which country? Which period in time? At what point? Is the bonus high? Is the bonus small? Do we reach thresholds? Do we not? Because there are countries where you drop from, let's say, 20% to 4% if you just go over a threshold. And then it's a completely different setup.
Yep. Now, talking about the payroll data environment, it's very, very important in payroll, as we all know, that you have data that's 100% correct, accurate every time you process your payroll, that it's transparent, that it's trustworthy and reliable. In your experience, how much is it a challenge to actually ensure that the data lives up to that expectation?
Oh, it's a constant struggle. The struggle is real. So having a correct payroll takes a lot of effort, a lot of parties, and a lot of work.
Yeah. And what in your experience, what are maybe some of the most typical or challenging aspects that you run into, and how has some of the transformation that you've been driving in the organization with creating more transparency across your organization in terms of the data environment, how has that helped to ensure that you get better payroll data accuracy?
Yeah, another saying I'm renowned for, and maybe infamously, is garbage in, garbage out. So if you have crap data at the beginning, you can't make it work, maybe. And payroll is really kind of like the last line of defense, the last checker. And we have strived for, and this is also due to audit requirements whatsoever, but payroll is strictly the checker mostly and not the maker. So segregation of duty is very important. I don't want to pinpoint it to 2i principle, but there are lots of steps, many review processes in place to ensure data is correct.
Correct, yeah.
If it is in our grasp or in our remit to be able to determine this, some of the elements we can't check if they are correct and are not supposed to check if they are correct. That's what the preceding system or preceding department is responsible for. But if we obviously stumble upon something, we will call it out and revert back. We implemented lots of global processes. We tried to really straighten with our vendors, same input formats, same language. Lingo is a big topic. For example, when we implemented the European vendor, there was a misunderstanding between a spreadsheet as an input tool or an input interface a tool. So simple language barriers can make or break it. So we have to be precise. And if unsure, double check. Always look out for doubts. Yeah. And it's just really it's constantly need to be aware and think beyond your scope. So if I'm asked on something, my mind goes through all countries and all aspects, all maybe experiences I had, and then I say, is this yes or no? And then my answer is often it depends, because my region is so big and diverse. So
But I think you bring up an interesting point that I've heard in another conversation the other day, that the fact that there is so much checking going on, as you're describing, lots of validations, and you called it payroll is the last line of defense, right? Before someone gets paid, before the data becomes sort of the official data in the company's environment. Someone said to me, what makes payroll data so valuable is the fact that it goes through so much checking. They said, every month, basically, we run a audit, if you want to think about it that way, right, on our payroll data. And what they refer to more kind of specifically is the fact that obviously you're sending out a document to your employees, and the employee will look at it, and they will sort of do their own tabulation, comparison, say, how come my car allowance this month suddenly looks different from previous month? So there is that sort of check, of course, as well. Ultimately, ideally, you want to catch anything that looks weird before it goes to the employee, but you have maybe the employee is sort of the last line of defense, right? And that will come back to you, and you need to say, well, was this what it was supposed to be? Or maybe indeed we have an issue and we need to correct it. But I think that's what makes payroll so incredibly powerful, right? Payroll information, like you said, just the amount of validation and checking that already goes in, all the way through from HR that provides input, payroll people that look at it, finance that before they start putting it into their books, they will have their own perspective on the data, and the employee. And ultimately, what you get to is you have this data pool that you're working with that is probably the most checked and accurate information set that exists in the company anywhere, right?
And what you said is right. With every payroll, every employee is your auditor, but we shouldn't rely on that one.
No, of course
But it
not.
happens.
No.
It happens, yes. But what also we strive for, and what really helped also payroll to evolve, is the customer focus, in the sense, not only we are not billable, it's a cost center for sure. But payroll has customers, be it internal or external. For example, our data is used to bill our clients if it's a sponsor for the funded bonus. So it has an impact on our income of the company. But what I, at least with my team, I preach every day, and also the payroll global payroll organization, which is led by my manager, and my leadership, is really also employees are at stake. It's the livelihood of employees, and every political or economic circumstance has an impact on the company, has also an impact on the livelihood and on the employee itself.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we treat our employees accordingly. On the other hand, we are the first ones who get blamed if something is wrong, which is maybe beyond our control as well. But that's a balance. So our employees are our customers. They earn our money. They work. We make our work so that they can do their work to sustain our company. So
To make the company operate and grow, right? And I think you're bringing up an interesting perspective, because we're talking about the data and the value and the accuracy, but let's not forget, as you pointed out, it's a person's livelihood that we're talking about, right? And that can be very emotional, right? While we're trying to be very clinical about it, did we get it right or wrong? There's also a lot of personal emotions involved in that as well, which I suppose is another very interesting dimension of the payroll profession, right? Because what people think, oh, this is all just push the button and process it and it's done. You do have to deal, I'm sure you're doing this on a daily basis, you have to deal with employees that, don't understand their pay slip, maybe have an actual viable issue, or maybe they've just misunderstood something, but it becomes very sort of personal, right? And you need to somehow be able to, just as well as you're dealing with the data, you also need to have that sort of human touch and the soft skills to deal with the people involved as well. So I think that is very interesting. Now talking about having lots of different skills, you've of course, as I know from my own personal relationship with your role over the last few years, you've managed to drive a transformation of the payroll function within Parexel. That's been very interesting and I think very successful. And I'm curious, in your experience, how did you manage to achieve this kind of transformation? Because I'm sure there's people out there listening to and resonating with a lot of the things we're talking about, the value of data and getting this better structured and organized. But it takes a lot, right? Payroll's only one part, as you described before. There's lots of other stakeholders and moving pieces involved. So any key learnings through your own experience in terms of how to affect that kind of change and transformation within an organization?
Yeah, you mean in particular the payroll consolidation, right?
Yeah. I mean that as one of the sort of key transformations that you've been driving over the last.
Yeah, payroll takes
while.
a village. First of all, I think communication is key, and strong leadership, like support of leadership, which we always had. Different leadership we had, of course. I think it's important to know before we were under HR remit. So payroll is usually either HR or finance.
Yeah.
I personally have seen it more under HR.
Okay.
But I see a trend now that this is changing.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Because you guys moved from HR to finance now, right?
Yes, we moved under the finance umbrella.
Yeah.
But our company made this decision due to one point, payroll being our biggest cost expense.
Right.
So, and finance is our biggest consumer.
Right.
And controls the cost for the company, of course. Yeah.
Yes, and some companies have payroll as an independent department in the first place, maybe under the C-level somewhere.
Right.
I have worked in a company where it was isolated once. So it really takes communication and really being aware of your status quo. It also depends on who does your payroll. Is it in-house? Is it external? What do you want to go for? Do you want to go for global? Do you want to go for regional? Where's your footprint?
Right.
Because if you're only in Europe, in Western Europe, you don't need a vendor from Eastern Europe and vice versa.
Yes.
So what is your payroll about? Is it very technical? Is it straightforward? Is it simple? And so on and so forth. So you really need to understand your status quo. So we did lots and lots of deep analysis in the first place. We did a lot of cost analysis. We transformed also into like one center of expertise for payroll. There was no payroll organization when I started in that sense. It started with my payroll manager at that point, starting this organization, building it from the ground, and then really evolving it over the years. And stability. Yes, there is maybe the push to change vendors every so and so on years, but these vendor relations are I'm sometimes joking, but they're like a marriage, and you go to couples therapy from time to time, and it's a relationship over years. And I think the biggest pitfall within any kind of business like this is change of personnel. Business is done by people. My former manager used to say that business is done by people, and that's really the biggest bottleneck. And robust documentation is really key. And then you make decisions based on that gradually, step by step. You need strong partnership with internal organizations if they exist. We have a very good relationship with procurement. They are absolute great partners, and we had legal support. I have a network of HR colleagues who work on payroll, for payroll, and we partner on topics. So
those are all sound like very, very important things: communication, leadership, having sort of stakeholder alignment. And you mentioned in your specific case that sort of your organizational alignment shifted from being organized under HR to finance. I'm curious, relative to your reporting and data aggregation transformation, from your own personal perspective, do you think the same initiative would have found the same sort of level of support if you had been organized under HR as it found under finance? Or do you think that was one of the enablers for you to move forward and get that support because finance was maybe directly vested in that sort of?
I wouldn't say that. With finance, you are closer to the people who get the data and use the data.
Yeah.
If you are under HR, you're closer to the people who work and give you the data, who work on the data. So it depends. It really depends. In our company, I would say payroll got a different priority now under finance, yes. But that doesn't neglect the fact how we were operating under HR.
Yeah.
Because we were always independent. And since we are under finance, for example, physically in the Berlin office, we're still close together. The office didn't change. We're still having meet and greets together, not meet and greets, but we see each other, we work together, we talk to each other. Our interaction didn't change. The only thing changed is my service line and the leadership. Yes, it has an impact, but it really depends on the leadership everywhere.
Now, talking about organizational structures, reporting lines, one question I'm always curious to ask guests on our show here is there's the famous seat at the table, right? That people in the payroll industry like to talk about. Hey, we need to, payroll needs to get a seat at the table. And I guess we're talking about sort of the executive table, the boardroom table, right? And there's different opinions. Some people are very enthusiastic about that and think, yep, that's something that payroll should have and should aspire to. Other people are a bit more measured and say, well, yes, payroll should receive more recognition, but does that translate into seat at the table? I'm curious about your perspective from, having worked in a large global organization. Where do you come out on that sort of topic, the seat at the table?
I think it's important, yes, because in the end, whatever the company does, it usually affects us.
Yeah.
And it's good to know from the start. And maybe you can imagine payroll like as a just-in-time production with or like a value stream, a lot of pieces. And payroll is maybe not the very last end, but at the end, and every decision impacts the results. And there are like this ripple effect. Some actually cause quite severe disruption.
Right.
And some maybe have no impact, but then it's nice that that they are out there.
Yeah.
So I think it's important.
So the seat at the table, maybe not to make the decisions, but at least be aware of and be a voice into the process early on is...
Both. It depends, again, on the situation, but if it's just the company wants to strive forward with an initiative, at least we can sanitize it maybe, or really weigh in. It depends.
Give them different things to think about, at least different sort of scenarios to be aware of for the rest of the organization. Yes. Okay, perfect. Thomas, what we're going to do now is we're going to switch gears a bit, and we're going to finish our conversation here with something that we like to call the lightning round. Okay, so as the name suggests, it's sort of fast, quick. I'm going to ask you a bunch of quick questions, and you're going to answer with a bunch of quick responses, something, whatever comes to mind first. There's no right or wrong. It's just kind of a little bit of fun questions to run through. So, you ready?
Go ahead.
There's no score at the end, so there's no. But also no rewards. Sorry. But let's get into it. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Albert Einstein's successor. He was my idol, so I wanted to become a quantum physicist, a little bit like one of the Big Bang Theory guys.
Yeah.
And I wanted to become a politician. As you can see, neither of that happened. So
Quantum physics and politics. Well, payroll maybe meets at the intersection of those two somehow. Kind of to what we talked about earlier, right? There's some science involved, some hard science involved, and there's some sort of, you got to be politically skilled to negotiate sort of and navigate the employee environment. I like that. What, in your opinion, what are essential qualities for a great payroll professional?
attention to detail, multitasking, and Excel skills.
Okay, good.
Exclamation mark, Excel skills.
Yeah, exclamation mark, good. I love Excel, so I'm all for it. What music do you listen to when you're wrangling with the data, when you're sitting over your spreadsheets?
It really depends. If I really deep down in data, I listen actually only then to music. I don't listen to music anymore as I used to in the beginning, but it's rather upbeat trance, vocal trance.
Oh, what do you do when you're sick of crunching numbers and you need to disconnect?
Beside of actually stop work, sports maybe, like workout. But if it is at work, I do maybe administrative tasks. I like coding invoices. I never stopped liking that. It's just very satisfying to click approve and code. I like to do this kind of admin task.
Okay. And when you disconnect from work, you mentioned sport. Any specific type of sports that you like
go to fitness classes. It's high intensity interval training.
HIIT, right? Yeah. Okay.
Don't want to advertise it right now, but yes, I do this kind of classes or weightlifting classes.
Yeah, and you said, I think I heard you say you like to cook. So those two can go hand in hand, I suppose. You cook and then you need the workout. What's the craziest request that you've received from an employee regarding their payroll?
Please pay me later.
Please pay me later?
Yes.
Interesting. They didn't want to get all the money.
Actually, there is a reason why people ask to get paid later.
Was it sort of is it like a deferred compensation type of request?
No, it was because the automatic bank transfers of the employees are maybe set up the way that they allocate funds to another account, and then if we pay too early, it's maybe shoved over too soon.
I see.
But yeah, it's sometimes funny, like if you get like I was paid too early.
Yeah, too early and too much. That's a good issue to have. Yes. All right. Well, look, to wrap things up, is there anything, any shout outs that you have, anything you want to make people aware of?
Teamwork makes the teamwork maybe, and it's really my team. I have 2 ladies in India working for me right now as payroll accountants, but they are like my left and right hand. And my leadership, all the colleagues I work with, like I said, payroll takes a village to really do. And I value the colleagues I work with. Most of them I work with since 10 years. Yeah. So this is what I would like to leave with.
Absolutely. I think, throughout my experience in payroll, it's always been, clear that just it's a team sport, right? Having one individual, you can't do it all. It's so complex. You always have challenges and issues where you need someone else to come in with with their expertise and their opinion. So I think that's absolutely correct and critical for payroll to work. Is you need to have a strong network of people that come together to make it work. Perfect. Well, listen, Thomas, thank you so much for coming on the show today. A lot of fun talking with you. I think you shared some really interesting insights with myself and the audience that will listen to our talk show here. So thank you for your time. Just to kind of conclude this session, the episodes that we're recording are available every couple of weeks. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's new episodes that we're posting through the various different channels, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the different podcast channels. If you do like our talk show, please subscribe to it so you can make sure you receive future episodes as well. Also like it, that will make sure that we share the love and the news for payroll. And thank you again, Thomas, for your time. Thank you for everyone watching, and until next time.